I shouldn't be telling this. Even now, even after everything that's happened, my hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold this recorder steady. I told myself I'd never speak about Nevada again. I told myself I'd bury every memory of that place, of that stretch of desert that should have never been marked on any map. But maps lie. People lie. And the desert remembers. Before I start, if at any point you hear something behind me, anything at all, don't assume it's just the wind. The wind in Nevada never sounded like this, never felt like this. This is a true account, as true as the rocks under your feet, as true as the sun that burns this state down to bone. I was a park ranger for 9 years. Back then I thought the worst dangers were dehydration, lost tourists, maybe the occasional cougar wandering too close to the campsites. But those things you can see. They exist in front of you in the real world. The Forbidden Zone, Zone K, as they called it in the old logs, that place, it doesn't stay in front of you. It doesn't stay real. Not real. Real. Not real. I still say that to myself at night, just to hear which version of my voice speaks back. It started on a Thursday, a plain, dry, sun-cracked Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sky has no clouds and no mercy. I was called into the operations shack. The door barely hung on its hinges. My supervisor, Halverson, didn't look at me when I came in. He was sorting through a stack of ancient folders, brown, sun-faded, brittle, the kind of paperwork that usually lives in basements or sealed archives. But there it was, spread across the desk like a crime scene. He only said one thing before assigning me to the patrol. Don't go past the grid markers. I nodded, but he grabbed my wrist, hard, and squeezed like he was trying to anchor me to reality. If your radio dies, he whispered, you come back. Immediately. No investigation. I remember thinking, what investigation? I'd been out there 100 times, and the only unusual thing I'd ever seen was a cactus growing sideways. But Halverson's face, God. His eyes were bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. His lips trembled when he handed me the map. And then, almost too quietly, he said, we shouldn't be sending anyone out there anymore. When I stepped outside, the heat hit me like a furnace door swinging open. A ranger gets used to that kind of heat, but that day it felt different, heavier, like the sun was staring at me, not shining on me. I walked to my truck and unfolded the map he'd given me. That was the first time I saw it. A perfect square drawn in faded red ink near the far western ridges. No notes, no label, no elevation markers. Just a boundary box like something had been trapped or contained. People always ask why I didn't question it more, why I didn't refuse the assignment, why I didn't follow my instincts. The truth is simple. In the parks, weird orders are normal. Secret wildlife surveys, military-run equipment tests, old mine inspections no one wants to talk about. You learn to shrug and keep moving. I wish I'd disobeyed. I wish I'd turned the truck around then and there. But I drove on. The first hour was uneventful. Gravel roads, dry brush, the usual desert soundtrack. But as I got closer to the red ink zone, something began to shift. The wind stopped, completely. No breeze, no dust drifting, no rustle of dried plants, just silence. My radio flickered, just once, a quick pulse of static like something brushing its fingertips across the frequency. I tapped the device and kept going. The terrain changed, too. The Joshua trees bent in unnatural ways, all leaning toward a single direction, toward that red square. The sagebrush grew thick, but only in tangled circles, like they were marking something the way animals do. The whole landscape looked wrong, and for the first time, a thought crept in. This place wasn't made for people. I slowed the truck, checked my compass. The needle spun a slow, lazy circle, even though there wasn't a hint of metal or interference around. That compass was military grade, never broken, never spun like that. Not real. Real. Not real. I parked at the old boundary post, the one no one had maintained in at least 20 years. The sign was supposed to say authored personnel only, but the only word left was only. The rest had been stripped away by something stronger than weather, maybe a tool, maybe claws, or maybe distance, space, time. I stepped out of the truck and the heat felt different again. Worse, like I was breathing air that didn't want to be breathed. I checked my belt, flashlight, map, sidearm, radio. Everything was there, but I felt exposed, like something invisible was checking that list with me. I walked forward. The sand crunched under my boots. But after 20 steps, I stopped. Completely. Because the world felt like it had shifted. The sky dimmed, not clouded, dimmed, as though someone had turned a dial. And the quiet had weight now, pressure, a presence without a shape. That was when I heard it, far off at first, a sound like someone dragging one foot through the sand. Slow, deliberate. Shh, scrape. Shh, scrape. I froze, my breath locked in my throat. Then my radio clicked, not fully turning on, just plicking, like someone pressing the button from the other side. I lifted it slowly. Halverson, you there? Nothing. Then, a voice too soft to be wind, too close to be distant. A single word. Closer. My stomach dropped. I spun around, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved, but the compass in my hand spun again, faster this time, around and around and around, like something beneath the ground was pulling it. Not real. Real. Not real. I should have run. Any sane person would have. But there's something about the desert you learn if you work long enough in it. Sometimes the danger doesn't chase you. Sometimes it waits for you to come to it. And I had already crossed the boundary. I inhaled, slow, terrified, and stepped deeper into the silent heat. That was the first moment I felt it watching me. And that was the moment my real story began. I remember thinking, as I crossed that invisible line, that the air felt thicker. You know how it feels when you walk into a room where someone's just had a huge argument and nobody says anything, but you can feel the tension hanging there? That's what the desert felt like. Except there was no one out there, just me, some twisted Joshua trees, and a sky that suddenly seemed a shade too dark. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Heat stroke starts with little tricks, right? Distorted vision, disorientation. I'd done the training. I'd given the safety talks. Hydrate, pace yourself, recognize the signs early. So I checked my canteen, took a sip, felt the lukewarm water slide down and sit in my gut like a stone. The compass finally stopped spinning. It pointed west into the heart of that red square, into the place the old logs called Zone K. I kept walking. The sound of my boots on the ground became wrong. In a normal part of the park, every step has an echo of some kind. Crunches, echoes, the soft hiss of grit shifting. Here it felt like each footfall was swallowed, like the ground wanted to erase the fact that I'd ever stepped there. I tried the radio again. "Base, this is Ranger Miller. I'm at the western boundary entering the restricted grid. Do you read?" A faint crackle came back, then silence. Then a thin, warbled fragment of Halverson's voice that I could barely make out. "Don't stay too..." The transmission cut sharply. I swallowed. Not real. Real. Not real. I told myself it was terrain interference. "Happens all the time out here," I said. "Just a bad angle with the ridges, just a pocket of dead air." But I clicked the radio off and clipped it back to my shoulder with hands that weren't as steady as they should have been. The land started to change in subtle ways. The plants were the first giveaway. The creosote bushes grew in perfect circles, bare earth in the middle like campfire rings. No random scatter, no chaos. Just these eerie, deliberate little halos of thorn and shadow. The Joshua trees all leaned in the same direction, their arms twisted like they were pointing or reaching or warning. I noticed something else, too. No tracks. No rabbit prints, no coyote trails, no lizard scuttles. The sand was smooth, untouched. If I went purely by ground sign, I would have believed nothing had crossed this patch of earth in years. Except halfway up a low slope, just before the first ridgeline, I saw it. A pole. Splintered wood half buried in the sand. I walked over and brushed the grit away. Attached to it with a single half-rusted nail was the torn corner of an old sign. The paint was almost gone, but if I squinted, I could make out the shape of black letters. K-E-P. That was it. Just keep. The rest had been sheared away. Keep what? I muttered. Keep out? Keep going? Keep quiet? The sound of my own laugh startled me. It sounded small, somehow. Distant. I straightened up and scanned the horizon, more to calm myself than anything. The desert stretched out in its usual endless shades of beige and burnt gold, but there was something off in the distance. A dark smudge near the base of the ridge, man-made, upright. The old outpost. I'd heard of it back when I first joined, in the way you hear about the weird uncle nobody invites to Thanksgiving. It was there, but you didn't talk about it. Supposedly abandoned when the park realigned its patrol routes, left to rot in the sun. Some of the older rangers joked it was where they used to send screw-ups. I never got a straight answer on why it was shut down. Now it was my waypoint. As I got closer, the wind finally picked up, but it was a strange kind of wind, thin and high, the kind that whistles without touching anything. The scrub didn't move. The distant ridges stayed sharp and unmoved in the heat shimmer. It felt like the sound of wind, without the wind itself. The outpost came into focus. One-story structure, faded white paint long turned bone gray. The roof sagged, windows dark. There was a radio antenna rising from the back corner, bent at an angle like something had pushed against it from above. I approached the front steps slowly. The door was ajar, just slightly, moving a millimeter back and forth as if breathing. I stopped at the threshold. Something primal in me wanted to turn around, say I'd checked it, log it, and go back to the truck. You can call it instinct, cowardice, whatever. Every hair on my arms stood up. The air inside the doorway was cooler than outside, a narrow band of chill like I was standing in the opening of a freezer. "Ranger Miller, Zone K outpost," I said out loud, like narrating would make it more normal. "Checking condition of structure." Nobody answered. Of course. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. old dust, stale paper, and something faintly metallic. Not blood. Don't go there. Don't dramatize, I told myself. Just rust, age, disuse. The interior was dim, but enough light leaked through cracks in the boarded-up windows to sketch everything in dull, gray outlines. A desk, a chair, a file cabinet, an old cot along the far wall, the kind of layout every backwoods outpost has. But there was something wrong with the dust. Out here, if you leave a place alone long enough, dust blankets everything, smooth, unbroken. That outpost should have been wearing 2 decades of quiet on its surfaces. But the dust on the floor showed faint marks. Not footprints. Not exactly. They were more like smears, as if someone had stood in place and slowly shifted their feet without lifting them, side to side, forward and back and forth, for a long time. At the center of the room, a metal folding chair had been pulled out and turned to face one of the boarded windows. It sat there, alone, staring at a wall of plywood. No dust on the seat. Not real. Real. Not real. I forced myself to move to the desk. An old logbook lay open, pages curled from dryness. The last entry was dated over 15 years ago. Patrol, Zone K perimeter. Status, radio interference. Notes, can't tell if it's closer when I blink. That was it. No signature, no follow-up entry, no closure. I read the line again. Can't tell if it's closer when I blink. My eyes burned from staring at the page. Suddenly, I was very aware of my own blinking. The way the world stuttered in and out of darkness for those fractions of a second. In, out. World, nothing. World, nothing. I closed the book a little too fast. The radio on the desk was old, analog, the kind we'd phased out years before. It shouldn't have had any power. The cord lay unplugged, the panel coated in grime. But as I turned away, I heard it. A soft rise of static, like a breath being drawn in. I froze. My heart hammered. I turned back slowly. The radio's power knob had twisted a fraction of an inch to the on position. I hadn't touched it. The static rose, then cut abruptly, like someone had pressed the transmit button and was waiting, listening. I stared at the microphone, its coiled cable sagging off the edge of the desk. "Who's there?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The static deepened in pitch, and beneath that, threaded through like a voice hidden in rain, I heard something. My name. Not clearly, not in a full sentence, just the shape of it. Muller. I jolted back, knocking into the chair behind me. It tipped, clattered to the floor. Silence. The static cut off. The radio was dead again. The power knob sat in the off position like it had never moved. I stood there, chest heaving. Sweat slid down my spine in cold trickles. Not real, I muttered. Real. Not real. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was a leftover echo, a stored charge, whatever rational explanation I could scrape together. I clung to those possibilities like a lifeline. That's what your mind does when the world starts to bend. I picked up the chair, set it back where it had been, facing that boarded window. Something about the way it sat there, angled just right, suggested it had been returned to that position many times. Like someone kept sitting, watching. I looked at the boards covering the glass, the nails, the overlapping planks. I realized then that every single board was nailed from the inside. Whoever closed this place up had been inside when they did it. The wind outside rose and fell, but inside the air stayed still, heavy, listening. I decided to step back out, get a look at the outpost from the outside again. Maybe the daylight would wash away the feeling sinking into my bones. Maybe once I was under open sky, I'd laugh at myself, chalk it up to stress. I reached for the door and paused, my hand hovering over the handle. On the back of the door, carved into the wood in jagged strokes, were 3 words. I hadn't noticed them when I came in. Maybe the angle of the light had shifted, revealing them now. They read, "It watches still." My throat went dry. I pushed the door open with my fingertips. Sunlight hit me. I blinked against the glare, stepping out onto the cracked concrete steps. I felt exposed, suddenly, like stepping out of a dark theater into noon, except I'd left the theater inside the desert instead of a mall. I turned slowly, scanning the horizon again. That was when I felt it for the first time. Not just a general sense of being watched, but a specific point in space where the watching was coming from. Out beyond the outpost, past the leaning Joshua trees and the still circles of brush, there was a dip in the land, a shallow basin of shadow between 2 low ridges. I couldn't see anything in it, no figure, no movement, no glint of glass, but my eyes kept wanting to slide past that spot. My brain didn't like focusing on it. It was like a word you can't quite remember sitting on the tip of your tongue. I stood there longer than I care to admit, staring at a patch of empty desert and feeling like it was staring back. Then my radio crackled again. This time there was no mistaking it. A voice, faint but distinct, came through the static and sand-blasted air. "Closer," it whispered. The same word I'd heard before. I took a step forward without meaning to. Not real, real, not real. I should have turned around then. I should have run. Instead, I tightened the straps on my pack, checked the map in my pocket with shaking fingers, and walked toward the basin of shadow. That was how I arrived. I didn't know it yet, but I was already inside the forbidden zone. A basin wasn't far, but it felt far. Every step toward it stretched longer than it should have, like the land was pulling gently backward, resisting me. Or maybe it just wanted me to notice the distance, to understand it. The farther I went, the quieter the world became. First the wind died again, then the faint hum of heat. Then even the sound of my own footsteps seemed swallowed whole. It was the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, like diving into deep water. Not real. Real. Not real. As I descended into the shallow depression between the ridges, the temperature shifted. The air cooled, not dramatically, but enough that I felt goosebumps crawl up my arms. The sun still burned above, bright, brutal, direct, but somehow this basin sat in a pocket of cooler air, like a shadow without a source. The ground at the center was unusual too. The sand changed texture, denser, darker, like ash mixed with grit. It wasn't blackened from fire, it was just different, older. I knelt, sifted some of it through my fingers. It flowed too smoothly, almost silky, but left a faint mineral smell behind. I stood up fast, brushing my hands clean. My instincts were beginning to scream, but my curiosity, my job, pushed back. That was when I saw the tracks. Not animal tracks, not boot prints. Circles. Dozens of them. Shallow, smooth circles drawn into the sand like someone had walked in perfect rings over and over. You could trace each one like a hypnotic spiral. Wide ones, tight ones. Some overlapped, some stalled and turned back, and all of them, every single circle, faced inward, toward the center of the basin, toward a single flat stone half buried in the ground. The stone was rectangular, about 3 feet long, weathered smooth on top, but the edges were unnaturally straight. Too straight to be natural. Somebody had shaped it once, maybe long before the park even existed. A faint carving stretched across the top. I brushed more dirt away, revealing a shape, an oval, maybe. A crude eye without a pupil. The symbol matched one I'd seen years ago in a confiscated doodle from a terrified tourist. Back then, we assumed the kid was just spooked by shadows. Now, I wasn't so sure. As I leaned closer, I felt something subtle shift in the air, like the pressure dropped. My ears popped once, then again. The radio crackled at my shoulder. I froze. "Miller!" The voice was clearer now, softer, closer. "Miller, don't look away." My chest locked up. I didn't move, didn't breathe, because I suddenly felt it again, the watching. Focused. Sharp. Not from the basin, not from the ridges, behind me. Slowly, carefully, I turned. Nothing was there, at least, nothing I could see. But the shadows cast by the ridges looked wrong. Elongated. Their angles stretched too far across the sand, as if the sun had shifted position without moving. My skin prickled. Not real. Real. Not real. I took a step backward toward the stone. The sand under my boot made no sound. Then, a whisper. Directly beside my left ear. "Don't blink." My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun in a full circle, stumbling slightly. The world blurred from panic. My eyes stung from being held open too long. Every instinct screamed to blink, to reset, to see clearly again. But I remembered the outpost log. I can't tell if it's closer when I blink. So I forced my eyelids up, stretching them until they watered. That was when I saw it. Not fully, not clearly, just a shape at the far edge of the basin. Tall. Too tall. Thin arms hanging like loose rope, head tilted slightly as if listening. Its edges flickered, not like something walking in heat shimmer, but like something struggling to stay in one place, like bad reception on an old TV. A shape between shapes. I lifted my radio with a shaking hand. "This is Ranger Miller. Anyone copy? I have a visual on a guide." "Unidentified. Approximately," my voice cracked, "approximately 7 feet. Not approaching, just watching. Requesting backup, immediately." The radio didn't transmit, didn't even try. Instead, through the static, I heard a faint sound. Not speech, not wind. Breathing. Right behind me. Slow, deep, inhuman. I didn't turn. I couldn't. My neck locked up from cold terror. The figure at the edge of the basin flickered again, closer now, maybe. Or maybe my vision was starting to blur from holding my eyes open too long. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks, a sting of salt. I blinked, just once. Darkness. Light. And the figure was suddenly halfway down the slope. I gasped. My lungs refused to work right. I stumbled backward until my legs hit the stone and I dropped to one knee. No, 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 no! Not real. Real. Not real. The basin felt tighter now, as if the land itself had shrunk. The air thickened, pushing against me. Something pressed on my shoulders, like unseen hands settling their weight there. The figure did not move, did not breathe, did not blink. But it was closer, unquestionably closer. I blinked again. Darkness. Light. Closer still. Its head now tilted a different way, as if curious. The pressure around me increased, like standing too close to a waterfall. My ears began to ring. "I'm leaving," I whispered, though the words didn't feel like mine. I pushed myself up slowly, never taking my eyes off the thing. My legs trembled violently. The basin sloped behind me, leading back toward the outpost and the relative safety of being anywhere that wasn't here. "I'm leaving," I repeated. "I'm leaving." I edged backward up the slope. The figure didn't follow, but it didn't stay still either. With each blink, each breath, each moment of lost focus, its position shifted. Not closer, not farther. Just wrong. Like it existed in snapshots instead of movement. When I reached the brim of the basin, the air snapped back to normal. My ears popped one last time, like crossing an invisible threshold. The desert wind returned in a single soft exhale. I sucked in air like a drowning man. Whatever that thing was, it didn't leave the basin. It stayed at the center, tall and silent, watching, waiting. I turned and walked fast, too fast, back toward the outpost, the hair on my neck raised the entire way. But as I walked, I realized something terrible. I no longer felt watched from the basin. I felt watched from everywhere else. Everywhere. Not real. Real. Not real. And that was only the beginning. 1,000 words. By the time I reached the outpost again, my lungs ached. I don't even remember walking most of the distance, just the sound of my ragged breath and the crunch of gravel beneath me. The world looked slightly tilted, like everything had been nudged a few degrees without my permission. I stopped at the doorway, hand braced on the wooden frame. The boards across the windows looked tighter now, closer together. I couldn't tell if that was real or just my nerves firing in strange directions. Inside, the air felt even colder than before, a shift, subtle but sharp enough to crawl under my skin. I turned on my flashlight and the beam jittered in my trembling grip. "This is Miller," I whispered into the radio. "I need help. Anyone copy?" A pause, then a broken reply. "Miller, repeat, don't look." The transmission dissolved into a sharp burst of static, like someone yanked the mic away. I lowered the radio carefully, my heart pounding. I needed answers, anything. I scanned the outpost, my light landing on the logbook again. The last entry kept echoing in my skull. Can't tell if it's closer when I blink. I moved toward the file cabinet. It was old, rusty along the bottom edge, but the top drawer opened with a heavy metallic groan. Inside were reports I'd never seen before. Yellowed papers, faded ink, clipped photos. Most were undated. Many had entire sections blacked out. The few readable bits mentioned things like auditory anomalies, visual displacement, non-terrestrial behavior. One report had a hand-drawn map nearly identical to the one Halverson gave me, except this one had a small X marked in the center of the grid, right where the stone slab had been. Underneath the X was a penciled note. The opening shifts. That word, opening, made something cold settle in my stomach. I didn't know what it meant, but I didn't want to find out. I shuffled deeper through the folder until a photo slipped free and fell face down onto the desk. I picked it up slowly, feeling that strange, static charge crawl across my fingers. The image showed a silhouette, tall, thin, standing at the edge of the basin. Its limbs were blurred by motion, or by distortion. But the worst part? It wasn't taken from the ridge or the outpost. It was taken inside the basin, from just inches behind the photographer. I dropped it instinctively. The photo slapped against the floor. "No," I whispered. "No, I didn't see anything like..." But that wasn't true. I had seen something like it. Exactly like it. My flashlight beam wavered. The shadows in the corners of the outpost seemed to pulse, stretch, reach. I pressed my back against the wall. Okay, think. Think. I needed to get out of there. I knew that, but something kept tugging at my mind like a thread being gently pulled. The urge to keep digging, to understand, to investigate. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It felt implanted. Not real. Real. Not real. My gaze drifted to the radio on the desk, the old analog unit, dead as a stone. But something about it felt wrong now, like I wasn't supposed to touch it. I reached toward it anyway. Before my hand got close, the air shifted behind me, a soft scrape, like a bare foot sliding across dusty floorboards. I froze. The scrape came again, closer. Shh. Scrape. My pulse hammered in my ears. I didn't turn around. I couldn't turn around. Instead, I stared at the boarded window in front of me, the thin strips of light leaking through the cracks, the dust floating in the beam of my flashlight. Something moved in that light. Just a flicker, a distortion, like heat wave shimmer, but wrong. I whispered, "Who's there?" The scrape stopped. Silence filled the room, thick, dense. Then, a voice at my right ear, barely audible, almost curious. Still watching. I jumped so hard I nearly dropped the flashlight. I spun around then, too fast, illuminating the far corner. Nothing. Just peeling paint, a faded cot, a rusted metal pail. But the air wasn't empty. It felt occupied. "Okay," I choked out. "Okay, I need to leave, right now." I stepped toward the door, flashlight aimed straight ahead. I reached for the handle. It didn't move. I twisted harder. Nothing. The old wood groaned and creaked, but the door itself, it felt held. Not locked. Held. My breath came fast, sharp. I braced my shoulder against the door and shoved. It didn't budge. Behind me, the scrape came again. But this time it wasn't just one step, it was several. Soft, slow, coming closer. Shh. Scrape. Shh. Scrape. My heart punched my ribs, each beat harder than the last. I pressed my forehead to the wood and whispered, "Please." The doorknob twitched. Just once. Then it turned under my hand, freely. I stumbled out into the sunlight as the door swung open behind me with a heavy, shuddering groan. I spun back toward the outpost. My flashlight beam spilled across the threshold. Nothing inside. No movement, no shapes. But the shadows inside the room looked thicker than they should have been. The door swung shut on its own. Click. I backed away slowly. The wind returned, brushing across my ears in a low hum. My radio crackled one more time. "Miller." A breath. "Don't let it follow." The transmission ended. I stared out across the desert, toward the basin, toward the shifting heat lines and leaning trees, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. The watching feeling wasn't coming from the basin anymore. It was coming from somewhere much, much closer. The 1,000 words. The moment I recognized that the watching had moved, that it was no longer distant, no longer perched at the edge of the basin, my entire body locked up. It was like my nerves were trying to shut me down before my mind understood what was happening. I stood frozen, the desert sun burning across my back, staring at the closed outpost door. The feeling didn't come from behind it, not anymore. It was out here now, somewhere in the open air. I stepped backward slowly, my boots scraping lightly across the packed sand. My breathing picked up, too loud in my ears. I didn't want to blink. I didn't even want to turn my head. Every instinct said, if you look away from nothing, it'll become something. Not real, I whispered. Real, not real. My voice sounded small, thin, like something was stealing the air before it reached my throat. The horizon shimmered, not from heat. This was different. A soft, subtle bend, like the world briefly folded. The Joshua trees seemed to lean farther than they had before, their twisted limbs bending inward like ribs forming a cage. I needed elevation, a vantage point, a place where I could see far enough to tell if something was moving toward me. The nearest ridge wasn't far, maybe 200 yards west. I turned toward it. That was when I saw the footprints. Not mine, not human. They stretched across the sand in a staggered pattern, each print impossibly long, narrowing into a point where toes should have been. The stride length was inconsistent, some short, some wide, as if the thing that made them didn't care about walking like a person, or hadn't learned how. My skin crawled. Bad. Wrong. Not normal. Not real. Real. Not real. Then I noticed something worse. The prints led away from the basin, toward me, directly toward me. I staggered back, staring down at the sand as if it might come alive beneath me. The prints ended about 15 feet from where I stood. Ended. No return path, no circling, just a straight line of distorted steps leading right to this spot. To me. I scanned the open desert. The prints couldn't be older than an hour, maybe minutes. There were no signs of wind disrupting them, no drag marks from animals, no overlapping human tracks. But nothing stood near me. Nothing walked. Nothing breathed. Except me. I took a step toward the ridge, then another, then another. Each footfall felt heavier, like gravity pulled harder with each stride. I kept my flashlight out even though the sun was still high. It felt like a shield, a thin illusion of safety. "What do you want?" I whispered. The wind answered first, sweeping across the rocks in a long, low exhale. Then my radio clicked again, sharply, like a finger tapping on the inside. Click, click, click. I froze. Click, click. Then, closer. The voice was almost harmonious with the wind. A soft, stretched-out whisper that seemed to brush just behind my left ear. I whipped my head around, flashlight beam slicing across empty desert. Nothing. Just shimmering air. I hurried toward the ridge. My boots dug into sand and loose stone. The incline wasn't steep, but my legs fought me with every step. The feeling grew stronger the higher I climbed, like something at the base of the ridge didn't want me leaving its line of sight. Halfway up, I made the mistake of blinking too long. My eyes were dry, burning from holding them open. I squeezed them shut reflexively for half a second. Darkness. Light. And when I opened them, something stood at the edge of the ridge below. A silhouette. Tall, slender, jerky around the edges like a corrupted video frame. My mouth went dry. I didn't even breathe. The shape flickered once like a dying light bulb, and I could swear it shifted closer by an inch or a mile. Hard to tell in the distorted heat. I blinked again. Darkness. Light. Gone. No shape, no outline, no movement, but the watching remained. Stronger. I forced myself up the last few yards to the ridge's summit. My chest heaved. Sweat stung my eyes. I wiped it away, careful not to blink too long. From the top, the view stretched miles in all directions. The basin looked small now, innocent almost. The outpost was a tiny rectangular lump against the flat earth. Beyond that lay nothing but desert and stone. Except, to the north, barely visible through the haze, I saw motion. Just a sliver, a ripple in the heat, something walking. Long strides, slow, deliberate. For a moment I thought it was a mirage, the kind you see on distant roads, but the shape didn't distort with the shimmer. It distorted on its own, like static running across a human form. I dropped behind a rock, chest pressed to the dusty ground. My pulse banged hard enough to shake my vision. "What are you?" I whispered. "What are you?" No answer, but I felt one. A pressure. Deep, heavy, like the weight of a thought that wasn't mine. My flashlight flickered, once, twice. Then it shut off. No, no, no. I slapped it, shaking it like a lifeline. "Come on, please." It flickered back on, weak, struggling. When the beam steadied, it illuminated something carved into the stone at my feet. A single line etched deep, as if scratched by fingernails or sharpened bone. "It follows memory." My breath caught. Memory? I didn't have time to think. The wind died again. The desert fell silent, and directly behind me, so close I could feel the breath on my neck, a voice whispered, "You remember now." I spun, dropping the flashlight, falling backward onto my hands and scrambling like a panicked animal. The flashlight rolled, beam bouncing wildly across the rocks, but nothing stood behind me. No figure, no shadow. Only the faint outline of footprints, new ones, appearing in the dust. One by one, as if something invisible was stepping toward me. I scrambled to my feet and ran down the ridge, across the flat, toward anything, any direction that wasn't here. My radio sputtered violently as I fled. "Miller, run! Don't blink!" The voices overlapped. Some were Halverson's, some were strangers. One was my own. The desert blurred around me. Heat, sand, cracked stone, and that feeling, that watching. It never broke. It never left. It only grew. I didn't run far, maybe a quarter-mile before my legs gave out. The desert stretched endlessly ahead of me, rippling under the sun in long, trembling waves. My breath came in ragged bursts. My radio hissed and crackled at my shoulder, sputtering fragments of voices that weren't lined up in time. "Miller! Behind you! Keep your eyes! Don't let it follow!" I tore the radio off and slammed the switch. Silence. Except it wasn't silent. The desert no longer felt empty, not even close. It felt crowded. Not with people, but with presence. A pressure. A density in the air, like the world around me had thickened, like the space itself had weight. Not real. Real. Not real. I stood slowly, wobbling, my knees weak from adrenaline and heat. My shadow stretched long across the sand, far longer than it should have been. I stared at it for a moment, confused, before realizing something that made my stomach twist. My shadow wasn't shaped like me. The arms were too long, the shoulders too narrow. The head, misshapen, tilted, wrong. I staggered back so fast I nearly fell again. The shadow didn't move with me, not right away. It lagged, a half-second behind, like a puppet waiting for strings. Then it snapped into place. I stared down at the warped silhouette trembling at my feet. My throat tightened painfully. My hands shook so badly I couldn't keep them still. No. No, no, no. Not real. Real. Not. A low sound drifted over the sand. Not the wind, not an animal. Something like a long, hollow exhale, or the distant groan of wood bending. I whipped my head toward the sound. At first I saw nothing but open desert, but then the heat shimmer shifted, and there it was. Multiple shapes, not one, not the single flickering figure from the basin. 6, maybe 7, maybe more. Tall silhouettes rising at uneven intervals across the flat, barely visible, faint, like shadows cast by things that weren't physically there. They stood motionless, watching me, not approaching, not receding, just watching. I felt my knees begin to buckle again. My flashlight twitched in my hand, the beam quivering across the sand. One of the figures flickered, just once, then appeared slightly closer. I blinked instinctively. Darkness, light. Now 2 were closer. No. I took a stumbling step backward. The nearest figure leaned, a long tilting motion like a tree bending in a storm, except there was no wind. I could hear my own pulse in my ears, loud, violent. I forced my eyes open wide, so wide tears blurred the edges of my vision, anything to avoid blinking. But my eyes burned. My body begged to close them, even for a fraction of a second. The figures flickered again. Now they were arranged in a circle around me, not close enough to touch, just close enough to surround. My breath shook. "Stay awake," I whispered. "Stay awake. Stay. Stay." The sun dimmed. I don't mean it set. I mean dimmed, as if someone slid a sheet of tinted glass across the sky. The light became darker, weaker, cold. The figures pulsed, grew taller for a fraction of a moment, then shrank again, their forms glitching in and out of consistency like a bad signal. One of them, one near my left, its head snapped sideways faster than any natural movement, like it was listening for something. Then, it mimicked my voice. My exact voice. "Stay awake." My blood ran cold. I staggered back, sand slipping under my boots. "You're not real," I whispered. All of them answered at once. My voice, layered, warped, overlapping. Not real. Not real. Not real. Then silence. A thick, suffocating silence. The nearest figure flickered again, except this time, I didn't blink. I saw it distort. I saw reality bend around it. I saw the air ripple like a curtain being pulled. Its head tilted slowly, deliberately, studying me. I tried to turn away. Couldn't. My body wouldn't respond. I felt pinned, held by something I couldn't see. The figures leaned closer, all of them, their edges smearing like wet ink. The circle tightened by inches. Not real. Real. Not real. My shadow stretched again, pulling out of shape, reaching toward them as if drawn like metal to magnets. The elongated arms of my shadow crossed the sand, touching their feet. Their shadows touched mine. The world tilted. The desert warped. My breath hitched painfully as if someone had pressed a hand against my chest. Then, the ground beneath me vibrated, just lightly. A soft tremor, like something large shifting underground. My flashlight flickered wildly in my hand. The beam sliced across one of the figures. And for the first time, I saw detail. Just a flash, just a fragment, but enough. Pale, bark-like skin stretched too thin across an impossible frame. A hollow where a face should be. Slits, vertical, running down the sides of its head like gills. And fingers too long, too jointed, dangling like loose cords. The flashlight blinked out completely. Darkness. Pure, absolute. I squeezed my eyes shut and screamed, "No!" But shutting them was the worst thing I could have done. Because the moment darkness swallowed me, I felt something cold and impossibly light brush the back of my neck. A single tap, like a fingertip made of air. I opened my eyes, and all the figures were inches from me. Close enough to touch, close enough to breathe, close enough to speak. But the worst part wasn't their presence. It was the realization that hit me like a hammer. They weren't closing in. I was. The world around me had folded inward without me moving an inch. The desert, the horizon, the sky, all twisting subtly toward a single vanishing point. Toward them. I stumbled forward, blind with panic, and the shapes flickered violently, splitting into double images. 2, then 3, then 1 again, like my vision couldn't decide what was real. The tremor in the ground grew stronger. The sky dimmed further. And a sound, deep, guttural, vibrating the sand, rose beneath me. A hum. Low. Ancient. The same tone from the radio, the same tone from the outpost. It was coming from the ground, from the basin, from them. Then, one of the figures opened its mouth. Not a mouth, a seam, a vertical split running down its face, peeling open like old cloth. And from that impossible opening came one word. My name. But not the way I say it, not the way anyone says it. It was spoken like a memory, trying to recreate a sound it had only heard once. Miller. The world tilted again. The hum sharpened, the figures leaned, and I finally understood. The haunting wasn't following me. It was awakening around me. The world around me seemed to bend inward, folding like soft paper. My vision stretched, narrowed, twisted, like I was looking through old glass warped by decades of heat. I staggered back, though I wasn't sure anymore what back meant. Direction didn't feel real. Distance didn't feel real. Not real. Real. Not real. The figures stood motionless again, perfectly still, like mannequins placed in a circle. Only their edges moved, blurring, pulsing, glitching in and out of place like unfinished sketches. Then something far worse happened. They aligned, perfectly. Their long limbs straightened, their necks angled the same degree, their torsos leaned forward in the same impossible arc, as if one thought passed through all of them at once and synchronized their bodies. My stomach turned. They weren't individuals. They never had been. They were pieces of something larger, expressions of a single thought, glitches in a single presence. A presence that was now fully awake. The hum beneath me deepened. The sand trembled in tiny, precise pulses. The nearest figure leaned closer, its face seam opening in a slow, silent stretch. It hovered inches from mine now, impossibly tall, head cocked as if examining a strange insect. I wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but my limbs didn't belong to me anymore. I felt rooted in place, held by invisible strings that scraped through the air like threads of cold wire. My thoughts felt slowed, like they were being sifted through something else, something that didn't understand the shape of a human mind, something trying to learn. The figure tilted its head to the opposite side. The motion was sharp, jerking, insect-like. Then its chest expanded with a slow inhale, though I wasn't sure if it was breathing or mimicking the act of breathing after watching me do it. The seam along its slick, pale skin pulled open a fraction more. And then I heard it. My voice, whispering from within that split. You remember. A cold shock ran up my spine. I stumbled back, nearly falling. No, I didn't. I don't remember anything. Stop. But the word remember kept unraveling inside me like a loose thread. And suddenly, I wasn't in the desert anymore. Not fully. The figures flickered in front of me, but around them I saw overlapping scenes, like layers of my own memory sliding into place. An old search and rescue mission, 6 years ago. A missing hiker. A teenage boy. Name, Kyle Danner. My first year on the job. We had combed the western ridges for hours. No tracks, no clues, nothing but the heat pressing down like a hammer. I remembered the taste of dust in my mouth. I remembered Halverson yelling coordinates through the radio. I remembered a shadow. Tall, thin, at the corner of my vision. No, I whispered. No, that never happened. But the memory kept unfolding. I remembered calling out for the kid, my own voice echoing off stone. I remembered blinking, just once. Darkness. Light. And then the shadow was closer. Just like now. Just like today. I shook my head violently. No, this isn't real. This isn't... The memory shifted again. I saw myself reaching the base of a ridge and stopping, staring at something on the ground. A shoe. A single sneaker. Kyle's sneaker. Beside it, a perfect circle in the sand. One of those same circles from the basin. Recognition slammed into me so hard my knees buckled. I had seen Zone K before. I had seen the figures before. And I had forgotten. Or rather, I had been made to forget. The figures flickered in front of me, leaning in unison. Their shadows stretched long and trembling across the ground, weaving around my legs like tendrils. One of them raised its hand. Long fingers crooked like bent antennae. It hovered, that impossible hand, just above my temple, not touching, but close enough that I felt cold radiating from it. My vision hazed, my mind twisted sideways. I heard my own voice again, but younger, clearer, terrified. Miller, don't look. Don't let it take the memory. Miller! The voice was from 6 years ago. My own voice through an old transmission I barely remembered. They had spoken through the radio then, too. Interfering, learning, copying. The figure's palm hovered closer to my temple. I choked out a small sound, half whimper, half scream. Stop! 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 The pressure in my head surged, a vice tightening behind my eyes. Thoughts flickered, scrambled, shredded. I saw my first day on the job, my training, faces of people I knew, my home, my truck, Halverson shouting something I couldn't hear. Everything blurred, everything tilted. Then, a single word snapped into place. A word carved into the stone in the basin. Opening. The hum beneath me roared suddenly. The ground vibrated. Sand shifted like a breath being drawn. The figures leaned closer. Much closer. Their limbs elongating, stretching toward me like the desert was pulling them forward. Something beneath the surface was awakening, or remembering, or preparing to open. My mind felt pulled toward a single point, a single truth. This wasn't about me finding Zone K. This was about Zone K finding me. About it calling me back, like it had been waiting. Waiting for the memory to return, waiting for me to recognize it. Waiting for the last piece to click. What I saw 6 years ago wasn't a missing hiker case. It was an invitation. A summons. I wasn't investigating the zone. I was answering it. The nearest figure lowered its head until that seam mouth hovered an inch from my face. You are part, it whispered in a warped echo of my voice. You are part of remembering. The pressure in my skull crescendoed. My eyes watered, my breath hitched, my knees buckled. The world folded inward. The hum deepened, rattling my bones. The figures raised their arms in slow, perfect synchrony, as though revealing something beneath us, behind us, within us. And I felt myself slipping into something not real. Real. Not real. Real. The desert peeled away. The sunlight shredded into static. The ground cracked open in a widening seam. A doorway. A single, yawning opening. And I finally remembered the truth. I had seen that opening before. And it had seen me. I don't remember how I got out. People ask me that sometimes when I slip and say too much. When I let the words Zone K or Forbidden Sector or that place slip into conversation over a drink I didn't need. How'd you get out of there? They ask. How'd you survive? I wish I had an answer that made sense. I don't. The last thing I remember clearly is the opening. I remember the ground splitting, not like an earthquake, not chaotic. It was deliberate, controlled. A seam appearing in the sand, stretching in a straight line beneath my feet. The hum in my bones. The figures standing around me like guardians or surgeons or hosts. Then, nothing. Not blackout, not sleep. Just absence. Like someone erased an entire reel of film from my life, cut it clean out, and burned it. The next memory I have, I'm lying on my back beside my truck. The sun is too bright. The sky is too blue. My lips are cracked. I taste dirt, metallic and dry on my tongue. The radio is screaming. Miller, copy, Jesus, Miller, say something. I reached up with a hand that didn't feel like mine and pressed the button. This is... My voice was shredded, thin, like something barely holding together. Miller. Where the hell have you been? Halverson's voice cracked through the speaker. You were offline for 6 hours. 6! We lost your signal in the western grid. Why did you even cross that boundary? You know the rules. 6 hours. I blinked up at the sky. I didn't... I swallowed. My throat burned. I didn't cross it. I didn't make it that far. Silence on the line. Then Halverson said very quietly, "Check your map." My fingers shook as I pulled the folded map from my pocket, the same one he'd given me that morning. I unfolded it and stared. The red square was gone. No boundary, no forbidden grid, no Zone K. Just standard labels, trails, elevations, everything normal. Everything ordinary. Almost. At the top corner of the map, in tiny letters in a handwriting that wasn't mine, wasn't Halverson's, wasn't any ranger I recognized, were 3 words. "You remember now?" I let the map fall from my hand. Not real. Real. Not real. They had changed it. Or maybe it had never been drawn at all. Maybe all of this was in my head. Except I can still feel the hum in my bones when I'm alone. I hear it when the house is too quiet, the same low vibration like static under my skin. I told them I'd gotten turned around, heat exhaustion. I told them I needed medical leave. They sent a truck. They asked questions on the ride back that I don't remember answering. I do remember seeing Halverson's face when they loaded me up, the way his eyes slid quickly over my shoulders like he was checking for something behind me, like he was counting. I don't know what number he reached. I don't think I want to know. They put me on suspension, mandatory evaluation. Officially, I experienced an acute stress reaction triggered by environmental factors. That's what the report said. I have a copy. It's in the bottom drawer of my kitchen under old bills and takeout menus. What the report doesn't mention is this. I didn't dream before that day. Not in a way I remembered. Now I dream all the time. I dream of the basin, of the stone slab, of circles in the sand, of hills that move when I'm not looking. I dream of tall, thin shapes standing in the corners of my room, in the hallway, in the reflection of my TV when it's turned off, flickering in and out, never fully committing to existence. Sometimes I wake up standing, not in bed, not on the couch. Standing, facing a blank wall or an empty window, my body angled the same way the figures leaned, my head tilted, my arms hanging too loosely at my sides. I don't know how long I stand there before I wake up fully. The neighbors think I'm just odd, quiet, a loner. They don't know about the times I've found sand in my shoes when I haven't left the house in days, or how the compass I keep in my drawer spins slowly on certain nights, like something is trying to find north and can't. I left Nevada eventually, moved states, thought distance would matter. It doesn't. It's not about the land. It's about memory. It follows memory. That's what the stone said, carved deep where nobody should have seen it. It made no sense then. It makes too much sense now. Every time I tell myself it wasn't real, something happens. The lights flicker. The TV clicks on to static. The shadow under the door stretches farther than the light behind it should allow. And when I give in, when I whisper in the dark, "You're real," the room grows colder, just slightly. Just enough to feel like an exhale brushing past my ear. I thought if I kept this all inside, I could starve it. Starve the memory. Starve the attention. But ignoring it doesn't make it weaker. It makes it hungrier. So I'm doing this instead. Talking. Recording. Letting the words run out of me, one after another, onto this stupid little machine. Like confessing to a priest that doesn't answer back. I know how it sounds. A disturbing, true Nevada Park Ranger story. the kind you click on at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep. Some voice from the dark telling you about forbidden zones and tall figures and vanishings and maps that change. I know. If I heard this a year ago, I'd roll my eyes. I'd say it was just stress, isolation, the desert messing with someone's head, heat, loneliness, imagination. But you weren't there. You didn't feel the world fold around you like wet paper. You didn't hear your own voice coming out of something that had no right to speak. You didn't stand in the center of a circle drawn in sand and realize you'd stood there before, and before that, and before that. I've started noticing something new, too. Reflections. Not all the time, just sometimes. In the dark glass of a bus window, in the microwave door, in the black screen of my phone when it's locked. I'll look up just for a second and my reflection will be delayed, like it's thinking, like it's adjusting, like it's choosing which version of me to send back. Once, I swear to you, I blinked and my reflection didn't. For half a second. Darkness, light. And there it was, half a blink behind, trying to catch up. Not real. Real. Not real. You know the worst part? Sometimes I'm not sure I made it out of that opening. Sometimes I think this apartment, this city, this life is just a long hallway between doors. A place I've been placed, a room I've been set in while something tall and patient stands just out of sight, watching, waiting, studying. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what it's learning. I only know this. Every time I tell the story, the details get sharper, the faces clearer, the hum louder, the shadow at the edge of my vision more defined. Memory feeds it. Which means, if you've listened this far, if you've pictured the desert, the basin, the stone, the figures, then you're remembering it too now. You're carrying a piece of it with you, wherever you are, whatever the sky looks like outside your window. I'm going to leave this recording somewhere it can be found. In a station, in a file, online, maybe on a tape in a box somebody opens years from now. It doesn't matter how. It just matters that it's heard, that it keeps moving, keeps spreading, keeps remembering. Because I think that's what it wants. To be known, to be remembered, to be real. If, after tonight, you notice anything strange, a compass needle turning lazily in circles, a patch of ground where no birds land, a stretch of park or forest or street where the air feels too still, don't stay. Don't blink in the same place twice. Don't listen too long when the static on your radio starts sounding like a voice. And if you ever see a shape at the edge of your vision, tall and still and wrong, don't try to look at it directly. It hates being seen. It loves being noticed. There's a difference. I'm going to turn this off now. Or at least I'm going to try. If the recording cuts, if the sound stretches, if there's a moment where my voice changes, that's not me. That's it. Listening. If you're smart, you'll forget this. You'll laugh it off. You'll tell yourself it's just a story. You'll repeat it to friends as a joke. You'll say, "Not real. Real. Not real," with a smirk. But somewhere, in the spaces between those words, it'll be listening. And if you feel hearing this, It already knows you. You don't believe me, do you? The recording continues for several more seconds, picking up only thin static and a distant, almost imagined sound, like something tall shifting its weight just outside the room. Then, silence.